Hey guys, how's everybody doing? It's me, Rocco, again. Thanks for coming back to the channel. Thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it. And yeah, so today we're going to be tackling another album. What is this? Album number 79 or 80 or something like that? I'm starting to lose track. But thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This is just a channel where I fucking review albums that I love and make recommendations. That's pretty much the gist of it. And I ramble on for a long time, as you guys know. I like to talk a lot about these albums because I'm really passionate about them. And it's a wonderful night tonight. It's a hot June night. I don't know when I'm gonna upload this, but I might go outside later and record a bit once it settles down a bit out there. The neighbors are having a barbecue. I don't want to disturb them, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, guys, today we're going to be talking about another David Bowie album. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the last review on The Man Who Sold the World from 1970. And as you can see, there's no rhyme or reason to these videos because we're jumping all the way to 2016 to talk about David Bowie's 25th and last studio album, the legendary Blackstar. And when I say legendary, I don't mean, I don't say that lightly. This album here has gained legendary status. And not only for the music contained within, which is absolutely fantastic, but for the whole circumstances surrounding it. I'm sure we all know by now, if you're new to David Bowie, this was the album that David Bowie released a couple days before he passed away, sadly, in 2016. And the lyrics of the album deal with his mortality. And it's just a really profound album in terms of the lyrics contained within and the whole theme behind it. And just the fact that he struggled with liver cancer for 2 years, still went out to produce this album, went out fighting as strong as ever with one of his most experimental albums, and really releasing this as Tony Visconti says, his parting gift for the fans. So a very emotional album, an album that has an allure to it, not only because of the music contained within, but again, because of the circumstances surrounding it. And a very huge album. When this album came out, everyone was talking about it. Everyone was buying it. I remember back in 2016, every single list of best albums of the year either had this at number 1 or at least in the top 3. This is just a universally acclaimed album. And I absolutely love it. And really, this album here, it wasn't the first Bowie album I heard, but when I heard David Bowie died, that is what got me into Bowie. I'd always known a few of the songs, a few of his hit singles that were played on my local radio station. The standard David Bowie fare: Space Oddity, Starman, Changes, Young Americans, songs like that, Fame, his countless hits, especially from the Let's Dance album. But I never really dug deep into his discography. But then when I found out that he had released a new album and then passed away a few days later, and everyone was talking about him, and as David Bowie says on this album, everybody knows me now. Ain't that the truth, guys? Once all that hubbub and commotion was going on, I started taking a deeper look into David Bowie's career. And rather than starting off with this album, I actually went back, listened to Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory, and a couple of those other albums before getting into this one. And I'm totally glad I did, because this album here is very inaccessible, a very strange album. This isn't an easy listen by any means, but honestly, if it was an easy listen, if it was a rehash of everything David Bowie did, it would kind of detract from it a bit, because that's kind of the whole mystique behind it. The fact that David Bowie was an artist till the very end, always trying to push boundaries, always trying to diversify his sound and do something new. If this album was just kind of a rehash of what he did before, it wouldn't have that legendary status. But no, it's anything but. I mean, David Bowie ventures off into the unknown on this album, combining a lot of elements of his career that he hadn't really touched upon yet, most notably the jazz influence. And yeah, it's a very avant-garde album, an album that takes a while to get into, but an absolutely spellbinding album, but definitely a masterpiece. And, again, not just for the circumstances surrounding the making. I feel like a lot of people, when they review this album, they focus so much on the fact that David Bowie died and the lyrics are about his death and everything like that. And, you can't take that away from the album. That's definitely a huge part of it. But really, I wish they focused on the music a little bit more, because I really think the music on this album is absolutely incredible, absolutely unique. Just this crazy fusion of free jazz and electronica, drum and bass, industrial rock. It's just such a strange thing that David Bowie had never done in the past, which is really what I think people should be focusing on. Of course, the lyrics and the whole circumstance surrounding it definitely matters. But I find that 99% of the review is just focusing on that. And I think that a lot of people kind of again, they gravitate toward this album. They give it this allure, this masterpiece status because of that reason, because of the profound artistic statement it makes. But I think musically, it's just fucking awesome as well. And again, it is a masterpiece. I do consider this album to be a bona fide classic of the 2000s, but it is a flawed masterpiece. I'm not going to sit here and just say every single song is fantastic, because that would be lying to myself. That would be lying to you guys. And, it's tempting to do so when you're talking about an artist that you love, like David Bowie. It's tempting to just say that, even the weaker tracks have their moments and everything, but there's just one or two songs on this album that just don't do it for me. And I think they're flawed tracks, but they don't impact the album overall. That's what I want to get across. When this album is strong, it's fucking phenomenal. It has some of the best Bowie songs. Honestly, 3 of the tracks on this album are strong contenders for top 10 David Bowie songs of all time. And one of them definitely is, or maybe 2 of them. And 1 or 2 songs on the album isn't going to diminish that, because you have to look at this thing overall. So yeah, incredible album. I don't know where it would rank on my top Bowie list. Probably like just outside of the top 5. Yeah, Hunky Dory, Ziggy Stardust, Spiders from Scary Monsters, Man Who Sold the World. Station to Station. Man, it might just be like my number 5 or number 6. So definitely in the upper echelon of Bowie's career. And again, I haven't heard every Bowie's album. Again, I'm lacking on the 90s and early 2000s stuff. But this was definitely a step up from The Next Day, which is a great album, by the way. I absolutely love The Next Day. But this one here is just so much more adventurous and creative. And that's what I love about it. It's just such a very creative album. Even if you can't get into it, even if it's a little bit too dissonant for you, you gotta acknowledge the creativity behind it. And you gotta respect the album. You gotta respect all the contemporary influences Bowie was drawing on. And appreciate it for that reason alone. So, needless to say, it was hard for me to get into it first. Like a lot of other Bowie albums, he's a very out there guy, but once I got into it, it became an absolute classic for me. And I was listening to it a couple times today to kind of formulate my review, and I was literally getting emotional. And again, not just from the lyrics, but from the music itself. Very emotional music, and yeah. So now let's talk about the history behind the album, which is incredibly interesting. Alright guys, so now we're going to delve into the making behind this album, the historical context, which I'm sure a lot of you people are really interested in. Although this album has been reviewed like a million fucking times since it came out, so you probably know this already. But the one thing I want to get across with this album is that it shouldn't have existed. I mean, this album here, its very existence is a fucking anomaly. And not only is the existence of this album an anomaly, but Bowie's entire late career period was just this huge fucking surprise, because as we all know, in 2003, while David Bowie was at the top of his game, crazy to say because he started off in the mid-60s, here he is in 2003. But yeah, he was at the top of his game. He'd released his album Reality, and he had embarked on a huge tour. I mean, a huge stadium tour. And David Bowie was really just at the top of the world at this point. But sadly, for touring, the exhaustion, I can't speak today. The exhaustion, the stress that he was going through. He suffered a heart attack in 2003, and they had to cancel the rest of the tour. And it wasn't looking good for Bowie. And then he just kind of remained silent for 10 years, making very few public appearances, doing very few projects. Sure, he did a few here and there. He appeared on stage with David Gilmour, playing a few Syd Barrett songs, which, by the way, totally amazing choice for David Bowie to sing, those psychedelic Syd Barrett songs. But he had pretty much been in the shadows. Then, out of nowhere, in 2013, he releases The Next Day, which was his big comeback album, one of his most critically acclaimed albums in the past, goddamn, maybe like 25, 30 years. And he was back. But really, it was just so unexpected. And he had recorded the album in secret. And when he released it, it was a big, big surprise for people. So really, David Bowie, people thought he was in retirement. People thought he was done for, which would have been totally understandable. I mean, the dude had 23 studio albums under his belt, multiple movies. He was a fashion icon at this point. Whoops. Oh, sorry, dropped my notes there. What was I saying? Oh yeah, he was a fashion icon, a public figure at this point. He could have easily have retired and just rested on his laurels, died at a ripe old age, and no one would have complained. But here he is, coming out with a new album. And the sessions for The Next Day were incredibly, incredibly productive. I mean, he had about like 20, 30 songs already in the bank. And of course, on that studio album, you can only release like 9, 10. Can't remember how many are on it, but He had a lot more songs in the bank, and apparently after recording the album, he was already writing the next one. Um, so he was really getting really productive, and I guess that 10-year hiatus had really sparked his creativity. And David Bowie, he's an artist at heart, not even just a musician. He's a fucking actor, a fashion icon. He did like some miming in the late '60s. Just overall, a very expressive individual, and retirement does not suit that kind of person. Let's just say that. So David Bowie was working hard, and then unfortunately, somewhere in that time, after 2013, 2014, he was diagnosed with liver cancer, which is just such a shame. And he kept it secret. Of course, his family knew about it, his wife Iman, and probably his daughter, his son. But he kept it secret from everyone else. And yeah, but he was still writing Blackstar, and I guess when he found out about his diagnosis and everything, that kind of just shaped his worldview and really seeped into the lyrics and themes that he was delving in on this next album. Now here's where it gets interesting, guys. Now David Bowie, the first instrument he ever played was a saxophone. He was an avid jazz listener, but up till this point, there were very few jazz-inspired moments in his work. It was just a genre that he loved and admired, but he never really delved into it, probably because he knew he probably didn't have the chops to pull off a John Coltrane or Wayne Shorter style saxophone solo, improvs. That wasn't what he was about. He was an art rock, a pop art, whatever you want to call him, kind of guy. Glam rock, and always changing styles. But jazz was always something that didn't really scream David Bowie. He never went off into, long instrumental sections. But he still loved it, like as a listener. And he had been frequenting a few New York jazz clubs, wherever the fuck you listen to jazz in New York. And he picked up on this band led by Donnie, let me get his name right, Donnie McCaslin, okay? And he actually recruited them to record their next album. And he recruited the entire band. They went into the studio, and they were really laying down tracks. And again, none of the band members knew he was sick. He didn't appear sick. He was very strong, put on a brave face. Little did they know he was just suffering from this fucking liver cancer. And, I'm sure cancer has affected all of us, so we can all relate to it. But yeah, it must have taken so much courage from Bowie to really power through that and release this music. And that's the second reason why this album shouldn't have existed. Not only did he make a late career comeback with The Next Day, but he was diagnosed with fucking liver cancer, and here he is still going, still progressing, doing something completely different, recruiting a completely new backup band that combined jazz and electronica, something that he hadn't done before. And I guess at this point he was saying, fuck it, let me do what I want. I've been a jazz fan my whole life. Let me incorporate some jazz in my music and really give my career the send-off it deserves. And he worked really hard on the album. I mean, let me get the dates right here. From January to March 2015, he was working about, I don't know, I think like 6-7 hours a day with this jazz band, which is, it doesn't sound like a lot, but for someone of that age, 68, 69 years old, that's a lot of work to be doing with this band. And they were laying down these tracks. He got Tony Visconti, his longtime producer, and bandmate at points to produce, lay down the string arrangements on the album, which play a very prominent role here, I might add. And yeah, they recorded the album. They released a few tracks ahead of time with David Bowie actually performing the sax. I think that was the song Sue and... Let me just check my notes again. Sorry, guys. 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore. That's right. There's a David Bowie song called 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore. Those two were released ahead of time. But later on with the album released, all the sax parts laid down by Bowie were replaced by Donnie McCaslin and the backing band. So a little taste of what was to come. But definitely those two tracks are kind of on the lower end of the album. And we wouldn't really get a taste of the true worth of this album until the track Lazarus was released, and preceding that, the title track Blackstar, which had a fantastic YouTube video, by the way. I mean, check out the YouTube video. It's so surreal, so artistic. And that video there is probably David Bowie's crowning visual achievement, I might add. It's just incredible to look at. And then there's this one part in the video where we see a skeleton in a spacesuit, and we all know it's Major Tom. And I guess looking back now, it's needless to say we all know what that refers to: the death of Major Tom, David Bowie. And that was a character that was reprised multiple times throughout his career, most notably on the song Ashes to Ashes. And at this point, it really symbolized David Bowie as a person. So watching that video now, it's really weird and freaky, but when it gets to that point there, it really hits close to home. So yeah, a lot of the tracks were kind of released ahead of time. David Bowie even made a Broadway or an off-Broadway musical called Lazarus, where the track Lazarus appeared. But again, no one really knew what was going on at the time. No one knew he was sick. It was only his close family. So when this album was released in 2016, and it was met with universal praise, that must have been fantastic for Bowie to read those reviews and really see that his music was well received, albeit very experimental. It still went to the mainstream, still did well in the charts, and then sadly he passed away a couple days later. But I'd like to think that he died peacefully. He died knowing that he was appreciated and his fan base was still there to support him till the very end. But the album wasn't fully appreciated until after he died. And I actually saw a couple reviews that were published before he died, and you could notice like a slightly more negative tone with those reviews versus the reviews that were published after he died. And I mean slightly. I mean, I really think that the critics did appreciate the music on the album, but when he passed away, they appreciated it even more, which is kind of stupid, to be honest. I mean, like, your opinion shouldn't change whether or not someone's alive, but it did take on a different context, so you got to give people that. But yeah, the album was released. It did amazing on the charts, went platinum. It was one of the best-selling albums of 2016. It won Grammys. It was just incredible, It was just David Bowie really came back into the mainstream for a bit there, and I sound like I'm a bandwagon fan because I did get into David Bowie after this album was released and after he passed away. But I think that's a good thing. I think if someone's death makes you a fan, I think that like the more the merrier, And but yeah, it was just incredible. Now I consider David Bowie one of my all-time favorite artists. I should also mention the album artwork behind this album is actually incredible. It looks rather plain with just that black star, but if you look underneath the black star, you'll see symbology here. It actually spells out the word Bowie in these random cutout sections of the black star, which is really cool. It took me a while to realize that. But also, the most amazing thing behind it is if you have the vinyl album, the star on the front actually folds out, and when you fold that out, take the record out and hold it against the light or something like that, you see this amazing star field, which actually took people quite a few months to realize. And according to the artist of the album artwork, there's a few more Easter eggs hidden in, and who knows if they've been discovered yet, but that's really cool. So a seemingly plain album cover like that, having all these hidden secrets and surprises, is just as artistic as the spirit of the album and David Bowie himself. So incredible artwork, although it looks plain at first sight, definitely meaningful. And not only is the artwork really meaningful and creative, but the title of the album itself is just honestly fantastic and so metaphorical. And I guess the couple days before he passed away, no one really knew what it was referring to. People probably thought it was referring to the occult or something, because David Bowie had a lot of leanings towards the occult in the early 70s, and the title track is very occult themed. But after he passed away, I think everyone was thinking the same thing, that the black star really symbolized Bowie fading out of existence, really passing on to a different realm, the realm of death. And that metaphor just, I don't know, it's so easy to arrive upon that conclusion, because if you look at David Bowie's career, he was constantly referring to space and space travel. And some of his biggest songs, Space Oddity, Starman, refer to that stuff as well. So having the title of the album be Black Star just really symbolizes this amazing, brilliant star just fading out of existence. But you know what, guys? Just like any star that's passing away, before it gets to the black star phase, it has to go through a supernova. And I really think that the album that came before this, The Next Day, as well as this album, was really the supernova that David Bowie was going for, the creative explosion that he really knew he had left in him after so many years of being a groundbreaking artist, before finally fading away as a black star 3 days later. So I really think that this album here should have been called Supernova rather than Black Star, because it really just delves. It's just really David Bowie's last bang, his last, gift to the audience, and that's really what it should be taken for. So again, a very, very special album. Now, let's get into the overall review, guys, where I'm going to be a little bit more critical. Again, I'm going to try not to sugarcoat it, but overall, this album is a definite classic. All right, guys, so let's take a closer look at Black Star. Now, the first thing I want to address right off the bat is obviously the lyrics and concept, which a lot of the people that review this album tend to really hone in on and focus on. I just want to briefly mention that the lyrics on this album are absolutely incredible. Again, it was David Bowie facing death head on, and rather than just calling it a day, resting on his laurels and kind of enjoying what little time he had left, he was just in the studio for countless hours working on this album and pouring all his soul, all his creative talents into the making of this thing. And it really comes across with the lyrics. I mean, some of these lyrics, it's hard to listen to without getting choked up, particularly tracks like Dollar Days, Lazarus, and the final track, I Can't Give Everything Away. Those songs there are just incredibly emotional and deal with David Bowie's own mortality. Now, there is another side to the lyrics on this album, with the other tracks on the album, like 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore. Yeah, that's the title. I think I already mentioned that. Sue, or In a Season of Crime, and Girl Loves Me, which are a lot more cryptic and disorienting to the point where, like, you really have no idea what they're about, and they're definitely up to interpretation. As well as the opening track, Blackstar. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of mystical imagery on that track that's definitely open to interpretation. So, we have the more straightforward tracks that obviously deal with David Bowie's mortality, and then we have these other songs that are just open to interpretation and works of art in and of themselves. Now, some of the lyrics on the album, I gotta say, on some of the other tracks, just don't really do it for me. They're a little bit jarring, a little bit expletive, like he swears on a few of the tracks, and that for me, that kind of takes me out of the experience. Anyway, that's just my complaint. But other than that, the lyrics on those other tracks I mentioned are pretty interesting, and definitely, I'm not going to analyze them by any means. I'll leave that up to you guys, but some weird shit going on, even using the made-up language from the novel A Clockwork Orange in the track Girl Loves Me. So some very strange and avant-garde stuff, just, again, showing that Bowie was a visionary till the very end. But yeah, this album here, and now let's talk about the music, which is really what I want to delve into with the album. What makes this album a masterpiece is that it has such a distinct musical style. Now, don't get me wrong, this album here has a shitload of variety. No two songs really sound the same, but there's musical themes and musical tools that the band uses that kind of run through a lot of the different tracks on this album, giving it this cohesive feel, although all of the songs definitely sound different. This is not a stagnant listen. You're going to get something different from every single track on the album. Now, for me, I tend to like the ballads a little bit better. By ballads, I mean the slower, more atmospheric tracks, like the opening song, Blackstar, the 10-minute epic, one of the best Bowie songs of all time. I would say I probably like that song even better than Station to Station, and I know that's controversial. Lazarus, Dollar Days, and I Can't Give Everything Away. I just love, how emotional and atmospheric and, beautiful those songs are. So that's what I tend to gravitate towards on the album. But then you got these three other tracks that are just bombastic, in-your-face insanity. 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore, Sue, and Girl Loves Me, which are extremely strange and very experimental. Some of them work, some of them don't. I'm not a huge fan of Sue, I gotta be honest. There's just something about, I respect the song, it's just, it doesn't work for me. It's very jarring and very, in your face, and again, very bombastic, to say the least. But yeah, so I tend to focus a little bit more on the slower atmospheric songs, which thankfully make up the majority of the album. And 'Tis a Pity She's a Whore is a fantastic tune as well. Now, musically speaking, it's all about the backing band. We'll talk about David Bowie's vocals later, which are incredible, but this backing band is just so unique. Not only are they a jazz band, but they incorporate elements of electronic music and even some hard rock at points here. So definitely not your conventional jazz band by any stretch of the imagination. And really, Donnie McCaslin, his sax playing on this album is absolutely incredible. Probably the highlight of the entire album. When his sax melodies come in, they're absolutely beautiful, emotional, and even hypnotic at points. Just a very atmospheric sax player. And flautist as well. He plays a lot of amazing flute on the album. And that runs through many of the tracks. And I just love how expressive he is with his instruments. I mean, the atmospheres he creates with his sax and flute range from absolutely beautiful solos, like in Dollar Days, to the crazy avant-garde freeform jazz of 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore. Just a really versatile sax player, could do basically anything with that thing. So definitely pay attention to his playing on the album, because it really is kind of the glue that holds everything together. And it's awesome how David Bowie let him take over, because as we know, David Bowie was a sax player, but Donnie McCaslin is just absolutely fantastic on this album, and probably the star of the show. But his backing band is incredible as well. Another major component of the music on this album is that it has a very industrial feel. The drumming is very simplistic and hypnotic at points, but it often locks into these like bass and drum grooves that you would expect from like more industrial kind of music, and that's cool as well as elements of electronica. I mean, you hear these weird electronic sounds at points. Again, this album was from 2016, and David Bowie must have been slightly influenced by electronic music, which God knows I'm not a fan of. But when you do it as tastefully as this, it's fantastic. And of course, David Bowie's '97 album Earthling really delved into that whole electronica movement at the time. But with this album here, it's just in bits and places, just to add another color to his palette. So it's definitely not overused, but you'll definitely notice some of the electronic vibes running through the album, as well as that hypnotic, repetitive, industrial sounding drum and bass, and as well as that electric guitar on that one track, Sue. So absolutely incredible. And the band does get off into more free jazzy moments on the track. 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore. They're really going all out with the free-form jazz. Might turn a few people off, but I'm starting to get into jazz now, and for that reason, that song is a lot more accessible to me now than it was in the past. So yeah, that's another major component of the album. But for the most part, the jazz on the album is pretty saxophone oriented, with again that electronica, drum and bass kind of backing to it, which is very unique. You don't really hear that every day. It's like jazz for the 21st century. And again, David Bowie's influence on this album range widely. I mean, not only is he incorporating electronic sounds into his music, but even hip hop. Okay, on the song "Dollar Days," "Girl Loves Me." Apparently, David Bowie was listening to a lot of Kendrick Lamar during the making of this album, and he thought he'd throw in a little bit of hip hop in there. And let me tell you guys, that's another genre I'm not a huge fan of. But David Bowie just pulls it off flawlessly. It's hilarious to hear him singing it at the beginning of "Girl Loves Me," but over time it just grows on you. So I don't know, maybe I'm biased because it's David Bowie, but I like his little hip hop inflections on the album as well. And of course, you get your more atmospheric David Bowie moments, your more standard string-driven sections. And of course, another core element of the sound is the string arrangements by Tony Visconti on the album. I love when albums use strings tastefully, like when they're not just blaring in your ears 24/7. When Tony Visconti comes in with his string arrangements, it always just elevates the song and never feels overbearing or overdone or over dramatic. And that's another core element of the sound. The strings do pop up a few times on the album. And that's one thing that David Bowie did before. He had some string arrangements on some of his tracks. So I guess that's the one link that this album has with the past. But very few elements. And of course, you have David Bowie's classic characteristic voice. He isn't really trying any completely different styles on this album, but at this point, he's really comfortable with the older version of his voice. I mean, of course, he's not going to be hitting the notes he was hitting in the 70s, but I love his vocals on this album here, and he gives an absolutely expressive performance. Again, I love his slower pace, more mournful vocals, but when he gets passionate and tries to go for the high notes, you could kind of hear that warble in his vocals that signify that he's no longer this young man, even when he's crooning and things like that. But rather than trying to hide it, he embraces that, and it just gives the album this authenticity. Honestly, I think one of my favorite David Bowie vocal performances of all time, and some of his vocals on this album are absolutely beautiful. Like, there's that one point in the title track that just sends shivers up and down my spine, and such a sincere and honest person. At other times, his vocals are absolutely insane and bombastic, like on Sue and everything, giving the song this haunting, almost nightmarish kind of quality to it, or just delusional or delirious, like he sounds in Dollar Days with the made-up language and everything. Sorry, I keep getting Dollar Days confused with Girl Loves Me. I'm talking about Girl Loves Me. And of course, the hip-hop performance. So very quirky performance by David Bowie, but again, his vocals are just incredible on this album. One of the best, most unique vocalists in my opinion. I kind of compare him to Peter Hamill from Vandergraaf Generator. They're both just very unique and intense vocalists, very dramatic vocalists, if to say the least. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got to say about Blackstar. The overall atmosphere of the album, that's one thing I should mention as well. It seems very dark, very haunting and ominous, but there are some moments of absolute beauty on the album as well. Actually, a lot of those moments, a lot of euphoria, interspersed with a dark, melancholic feel, and the insane, acidic, in-your-face, bombastic moments, like I was mentioning before. So a very unsettling album at points, but little speckles of beauty interspersed that just lift your spirits up to the heavens. So such a unique album, such a freaking masterpiece, guys. Now let's take a look at the album track by track. Alright guys, so starting off the album, we get one of the all-time Bowie greats, the 10-minute epic title track, Blackstar. And when I say this is one of the Bowie greats, I really mean it, guys. I mean, this track here stands head-to-head with Station to Station, which is the other long 10-minute song in his discography. But I'm going to say it, guys, this is a better track than Station to Station, and I really mean that. I mean, this song here is fantastic, absolutely spectacular, and you have to go out and listen to it. This album is worth the price of admission of this track alone. No other song in Bowie's entire discography is as hypnotic, mesmerizing, and dark with little shimmers of beauty as this song here, and it's absolutely genius. It's mystical, it's cryptic in the lyrics, and it just has this allure to it, which is incredible, and the whole band is on fire on the song. Just so tasteful, and none of the members of the band are really overplaying, but you can always hear their contributions on this track. And really, this one here is a melting pot of all the different styles that Bowie was incorporating on the album. You got the jazz influence, you got the electro beat, you got the string arrangements. It's all here, guys. It's all here, and it's just fantastic. Really, a song of two halves. The first 4 minutes of the track is just this really kind of creepy, hypnotic, mesmerizing section driven by the string section, an electro drum beat, and the saxophone, as well as David Bowie's haunting vocals. But then later on, it gets a little bit brighter, a little bit sunnier, and becomes a more conventional David Bowie song before wrapping up again with the original theme. And you just gotta love it, guys. It starts off with that amazing, mournful string arrangement, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this pounding drum beat comes in. It's just absolutely steady, and you know, it doesn't really fit in with the track because it's very upbeat, very up-tempo, but you get the slow, haunting strings going on in the background. And then before you know it, David Bowie comes in with his absolutely spectral, ghastly vocals. I mean, he sounds extremely haunting on this track. And it's just so hypnotic with that constant drum beat going on in the background and the gentle saxophone lines just kind of going through. It's just, wow, guys. And then when David Bowie's vocals reach the point where he says, at the center of it all. That part there just, honestly, just goosebumps every single time. And again, the lyrics are very cryptic. He mentioned something called the Village of Orman, a solitary candle. It just has this mystique to it that, you know, I'm not going to decipher in this video. But the lyrics are amazing, and the delivery of the vocals really backs up the haunting nature of the song. Amazing. At the 1 minute, 50-second mark or so, we get a great sax section where it kind of comes out from the shadows and delivers this beautiful laid-back passage. Awesome. And then it comes in again at the 3 minute, 35-second mark. But here it's a little bit more blaring with playing these sparse notes. Sorry, I had to check my notes there. And you get the electro rhythms going on in the background, which it shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. But then at the 4 minute mark, that hypnotic groove ends, and we get these haunting moans and wind-like sounds in the background. Again, very, very creepy. But then the strings come back in, and they start playing this beautiful, uplifting melody, kind of like the release that the tension was building. And Bowie comes in with these beautiful, beautiful vocals when he says, "Something happened on the day he died." It's just so euphoric when he comes in with those vocals, and just a perfect release of the tension there. But then all of a sudden it gets into a sleazier up-tempo section with the swinging saxophone in the background and the backing vocals singing, "I'm a black star, I'm not a porn star." They say that at one point. And it just has this weird avant-garde kind of feel that was kind of abandoned for a few minutes there, but it's back. And it kind of alternates between that and the beautiful section I was just talking about, backed up by the strings. And it's great. I love the sleazy swinging sax work on that. And that section there is just kind of this oasis in the middle of this haunting, foreboding track. But then before you know it, we hear the moans coming in on the background, overlapping with the saxophone, and you could tell it's going to get back to the original theme of the track. And when it does, it's fantastic. We got the flute in the background this time, instead of the sax reprising that original melody. And when Bowie comes in with his vocals, it's just a magical moment, reprising the intro of the song. And here we don't have the electro beat. We actually have the strings in the background, giving it a more epic, climactic feel. And also there isn't any sax on this section. It's more flute driven, giving it this nice, again, a nice way to end the track with a more climactic sound. So amazing. And the last 30 seconds of the track is just this weird sax and flute kind of free form section. It's Bowie. He's got to end his songs in a weird way. But again, guys, such an alluring song, such a masterpiece. What can you give Blackstar? I mean, it's a 10 out of 10. One of his all-time best songs, and I really mean that. There's nothing else like it. Just go out and listen to it. The sax work is amazing and tasteful, and Bowie's vocals on this track, some of his best. Really embracing the older sound of his voice at this point. For you guys out there that like your David Bowie songs a little crazy with a little bit of zany edge to it, this is the track for you guys. This is the first of those 3 weird songs on the album that I was talking about. And yeah, this song's absolutely batshit crazy. Track 2, "'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore." That's right, that's the name of the song. Apparently it's about, a soldier in World War One running into this hooker or whore or whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to get into the lyrics, but it's actually a great song. Out of the 3 weirder songs of the album, this one here is definitely my favorite. A very dissonant, free jazz kind of tune, but with a lot of strange elements to it. But really, what's driving this track is this absolutely industrial drum and bass beat that runs through the entire thing. It does not let up. It's just absolutely incredible. And it's funny because you wouldn't expect a beat like this to be juxtaposed with these crazy saxophone solos, but that's just what you get. And really, the song gets really dissonant and freeform with the saxophone, piano, all that stuff on top of that crazy drum and bass riff. But then during the verses, when David Bowie's singing, it all congeals and it gets a little bit more accessible, a little bit more straightforward, and even some like melodic sax moments kind of break through at certain points. I think at about the 2-minute mark, there's a really nice little sax bit there. But for the most part, it's bombastic, in your face, just insanity. And David Bowie's vocals here are pretty great as well. He basically croons the entire song, but when he sings the line, "'Tis a pity she was a whore," he tries to do like a falsetto on the word whore. And but he can't do it because his voice has aged over the years. And it just comes out sounding just really strange, but I like it. It really fits the strange atmosphere of the track. And it's great. And then later on, it sounds like there's 2 saxes kind of overdubbed on top of each other, just creating this cacophony of sound. Just a larger-than-life track. Really weird, hard to get into at first, but I feel like the more you listen to it, that hypnotic bass and drum groove in the background really sucks you in, and it's just a really strange track. I would give it, I don't know, it's hard to rate songs like this. Probably for enjoyment, I would give it an 8.5. For adventurousness, probably like a 9 or something. So let's just say an 8.5. Now, track number 3, guys. Lazarus. This was the single from the album, and definitely one of the top tier Bowie songs, right up there with the title track, as one of my all-time favorites by the man. And this track here it does things to me. It does things to most people that listen to it that a lot of songs don't do. Not a lot of songs have this genuine sorrow and emotion to it as Lazarus. And it's just a beautiful testament to David Bowie's career, and just a really sad and haunting look at a man facing death head on and writing about it, and really turning it into an art form. I know it's been said a million times, but that's really what this song is. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful song. But the musicianship, guys, that's what I want to talk about. It's just incredible. And it just makes perfect use of the guitar, not as a lead instrument, but just adding color to it. And I love how they use the guitar to create these sharp sounds that just really cut through and create a lot of drama, as well as the amazing bass playing. I mean, I got to give a shout out to this bass player, Tim Lefbury, or I'm butchering it. I'm totally butchering it, guys. But his bass lines on this song are just incredible. I mean, focus in on them. It's just absolutely thumping throughout the entire track. Just a beautiful song. The way it starts, kind of misleading. It just starts off with this cool slow drum beat and this simplistic guitar riff. Doesn't really do the song justice. But then, as soon as that main melody comes in with the saxophone, with the melodic and mournful, that's when you know that this song is going to be something special. And Oh man, I love that melody there. It's just so mournful. And then when David Bowie comes in, the first lines he sings are "Look up here, I'm in heaven." And man, when he sings that every single time, I get a little bit choked up. Just such a powerful track about somebody moving on from this world and going into the next. Just like Lazarus, who was resurrected by Jesus, but in David Bowie's sense, he's being resurrected to the next level, to the greater, you know, whatever the hell's after this life. Who knows if there's anything, but Dave, according to David Bowie, there probably is. And yeah, it's just awesome. And I love the sharp guitar riff that goes between his vocals in the background. Again, giving it that dramatic edge to it. And the song does pick up at the 2-minute 45-second mark. It gets into like this more sleazy, this sultry sax section where David Bowie sings, "By the time I got to New York," and this part here is hilarious. There's the line on the track where he says, "I was looking for your ass," and the first time I heard that, it just totally like took me out of the track for a second. I'm like, wait a second, did he just say ass? I had to look it up, and indeed, David Bowie was looking for someone's ass in New York. So again, giving it that human, earthly touch in this kind of heavenly track. And I love how the song just picks up, different instruments come in, and it just builds this climactic saxophone solo, which is absolutely incredible. It starts off kind of slow and mournful and kind of conventional, but the longer it goes on, the more avant-garde it gets, with a lot of like stop and start sections. And it's great stuff. I mean, when it builds up to that sax solo, it's fantastic. And the end of the song gets back into the dirgy feel of it, driven by the bass and this guitar that just sharply cuts through the mix, creating these like distorted flashes of energy on top of that laid back bass groove there. And then the song just kind of fizzles out. Man, Lazarus, what an amazing track, guys. So emotional. And the musicianship is incredible. Love the guitar work, love the sax solo, and the bass work is incredible. So musically speaking, it's almost flawless. I would give this song, man, I want to give it a 10 out of 10, but it's tough because I like the title track slightly better. Some days I feel a 10 out of 10. Today I'm going to stick with a 9.5. Right, guys, and now we get into the second of the weird tracks on the album. Sue, in parentheses, or A Season of Crime. Now, don't ask me what the fuck the lyrics mean. I can't help you with that. It's just cryptic, incomprehensible to me. But as always, I'm going to focus on the music here. Now, guys, I mentioned that there was one or two songs in this album that just didn't do it for me. And this is one of them. This one here is probably, this is by far my least favorite track on the album. And it's not a bad song per se. It's just, I think it's an experimental track, but it's kind of a failed experiment, if you ask me. And I like each individual component of the song. Just the problem is David Bowie's vocals, man. I mean, the song establishes this really frantic, intense, industrial kind of riff that goes through the entire track. And it's great. I love the riff. It's hypnotic. It's easy to get into. But David's vocals on the song, they're kind of crooning, and he sings these really slow, mournful lines over it. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't gel for me. And, if you look back at the song Blackstar, that electro drum beat didn't really gel with the, slow and ominous string section, but it worked. It sounded amazing together. But on this track here, it I don't know, just doesn't do it for me, guys. But overall, you got to give the guy credit for experimenting. And, if I had a choice to take this song off the album, I actually wouldn't, because it's a nice change of pace. It's really frantic, upbeat, and again, a very anxiety-driven industrial beat that runs through the entire song. Now, David Bowie, if he wasn't singing a completely different song, this song would have worked. Like, if his singing was more frantic and intense, this would have been a fantastic song. But sadly, just the tracks are rid of it. And yeah, it's a very guitar, bass, and drum-oriented song. The drumming's fantastic, especially at the end, gets really bombastic and excellent. And not much sax. There is a little bit here and there, just adding like little touches of color, but overall not much sax. So yeah, just really weird, nightmarish kind of song. That's the best way I would describe it. But yeah, overall for a rating, I would say it's a 7.5 for me. I just got to base it on how much I enjoy the track, and like, the level of creativity. So I'm kind of meeting in the middle there and giving it a 7.5. Alright, guys, now speaking of weird-ass songs, this next one here that I've alluded to multiple times during this review, Girl Loves Me, is honestly, for my money, probably the weirdest David Bowie song. This is Bowie's attempt at incorporating hip hop into his sound, and it's not what you would expect, guys. This is just the most avant-garde track probably on the entire album, and I like it. I actually like. I wouldn't say it's a great song. You know, it's not a song that I would listen to outside of the context of this album, but it actually works, and it has these weird things that you would never think go together, but David Bowie makes it work. Again, he was an artistic genius, and I'm not saying this song's a masterpiece at all, but creatively speaking, it kind of is. Like, there's nothing else like this out there. It's just, it's inexplicable. It's so hard to describe. And to make matters even weirder, David Bowie is singing in this weird language that was developed for the novel A Clockwork Orange. If you guys saw the movie and read the book, you guys know what I'm talking about. But he uses that a lot in the track, just creating this delirious kind of gibberish effect to the music. And it just adds that other layer of otherworldliness that takes the song into the madhouse. I mean, this song belongs in a fucking asylum. But I absolutely love the bass groove that runs through the main verse of the track when he sings, "Where the fuck did Monday go?" Which is, it's weird hearing David Bowie swearing, and again, the lyrics are kind of vulgar when they're in English, but yeah, the bass line there is just absolutely pumping and grooving. And I love the string section during the chorus when we get the mournful, ominous "Girl loves me." That part there is really cool, and it just kind of alternates between those two sections. We do get kind of a more uplifting section with the string swelling, and he sings another kind of gibberish line. I understood the word Goebbels, like from Hitler's regime, that guy. And again, people always accuse Bowie of having like Nazi sympathizing origins, which is absolutely bullshit, but he does clearly say the word Goebbels in the song, so make of that what you will. And later on, the strings get a little bit more haunting, a little more ominous, but more or less it alternates between that awesome bass groove and the more ominous chorus of the track. And it has some electro rhythms in there as well, but absolutely no saxophone. So I think this is the only track on the album with zero sax. So if you don't like saxophone, this might be the song for you. Just incredibly bizarre song. I would give it an 8 out of 10. I wouldn't give it higher than that, but it is an enjoyable track. But my second least favorite on the album. Alright, guys, so after those two incredibly weird and experimental tracks, the album, was losing a little bit of steam. Those two tracks have a lot of merit, don't get me wrong. But, it was getting a little bit, away from the masterpiece territory. But don't worry, guys, because the next track here and the song after it are just absolute classics. And this next one in particular, Dollar Days, I'm going to say it right now. This is just one of the greatest Bowie songs. And it seems like when people talk about this album, this song kind of slips under the radar. Not a lot of people praise this track, but I not only think this is one of the best tracks on the album, but one of the best tracks ever. Not even from David Bowie. This is just one of my favorite songs. And I would honestly put this in a top 10 David Bowie list, right along with the title track, Blackstar. It's one of the most beautiful, emotional tracks in Bowie's career. Just as emotional as Lazarus, but it has a lot more weight to it, in my opinion. Not because of the lyrics, but because of the bass and the melodic piano running through the entire track. And let's not forget the sax, guys. This really is the showcase for the saxophone. There's not only one, but two fantastic solos. And the song here, again, it deals with David Bowie basically reflecting on his own life and reflecting on his impending death and impending doom. And it's just such a powerful song. That's the key word. It's a powerful track. And nothing on this song is avant-garde at all. This is extremely easy to get into, extremely straightforward and from the heart, but just flawlessly executed. It starts off with this amazing piano and haunting guitar melody with this sultry sax underneath it. It's just so tasty, guys. And then when the vocals come in, Bowie gives a fantastic performance. I love how his vocals kind of speed up at points to give certain things emphasis. And the piano melody is just so beautiful, so gorgeous. But then when it gets into the chorus, when he sings the line, "I'm dying to," there's this amazing bass line in the background that completely makes the entire thing. I mean, it gives it so much gravity, so much weight. And I just love the delivery of his vocals there. It's just honestly freaking incredible. And sorry, I think this is the part where he speeds up certain sections to give it emphasis, not the main chorus. Then we get the first sax solo at the 2-minute, 20-second mark. And this one here is just, it absolutely sings with the beautiful piano in the background. kind of repeats the main theme of the song a bit, and then at the 3-minute 20-second mark, we get another sax solo. But this one here is just way more intense, and just with the apocalyptic sounding string section in the background, it's just so emotional, so powerful. One of the most powerful Bowie songs ever. And I love how it ends with this amazing gradual buildup where the guitar kind of comes out of the woodwork, becoming the more prominent instrument. It's just something else, guys. One of the most emotional Bowie songs, and it's only 4 minutes and 40 seconds, so probably the shortest track on the album, and one of the best. Honestly, it's actually a toss-up between this and Blackstar. I would give this song a 10 out of 10 any fucking day. I just love it that much. And the funny thing is, it wasn't the song on first listen that really grabbed me by the balls, but over the years, with repeated listens, this track here really holds up, and I'm proud to say it's one of my favorites by Bowie. So Dollar Days, don't sleep on this one, guys. It's one of the best. Damn, it gets dark pretty fast out here, guys. Damn, we finally made it to the last track on the album. I Can't Give Everything Away. And this is hands down, again, one of the greatest David Bowie songs. Right at the end of this album, they hit you with Dollar Days and then I Can't Give Everything Away. Two of the strongest songs on the album, two of the strongest songs in Bowie's discography. That, it makes you kind of forget the shortcomings of tracks like Sue and I guess Girl Loves Me. I don't know. I do love that song, but I Can't Give Everything Away. The last track on the last Bowie album. And there's something about this song, something hypnotic, something actually serene and relaxing about it. But, oh man, it has this aura, it has this essence that you can't really describe. Kind of like the feeling that someone's moving on to bigger and better things. And again, in David Bowie's case, if there is an afterlife, he definitely would be moving on to bigger and better things. But it's such an incredible song. And the first thing you're going to notice about it is that it has this harmonica melody that is just totally reprising the track A New Career in a New Town from David Bowie's classic album Low from 1977. Definitely got to review that album one day, guys. But yeah, reprises that. It's really one of the first times David Bowie actually reprises a musical theme from the past. He's reprised lyrical themes, if you consider Ashes to Ashes kind of the sequel to Space Oddity. But in terms of musical themes, he never really, goes back into the past and brings back melodies he came up with before. But he does with this song, and it's very telling. It's kind of like a send-off of his entire career. And again, choosing to reprise a song, A New Career in a New Town, again, just gives you the impression that this is David Bowie saying he's moving on to bigger and better things. Now, I don't really know what he means by I can't give everything away. That's definitely up to interpretation. But it definitely leaves a sense that, we might know David Bowie from his 25 incredible studio albums, but as a person, we couldn't really know him. He couldn't give himself away to everybody. Really, his closest friends and family were the only people that got to take a look on, the man himself, David Bowie the man, rather than David Bowie the superstar, like we've all seen him. But I really think that's what this song's about. And at the end of the day, this might be his last farewell to his family in musical form. So, incredible track. I love that harmonica riff, and of course, you get the amazing kind of hypnotic drum beat in the background with the string section. The strings are really shining on the song. And I love Bowie's vocals here. There's just something so peaceful and serene about it. When he sings, I can't give everything away. Just really emoting and pouring himself out. Pouring his emotions out. Really nothing avant-garde on the track. And it feels like such a heartfelt track. The saxophone, guys. Again, this song here in Dollar Days, just a perfect showcase for the saxophone. At the 1 minute 50-second mark, it cuts through and develops into this fantastic solo, one of the best on the album. But rather than just soloing, we still get David Bowie singing the chorus of the track, I Can't Give Everything Away. And I just love that. I love how that solo kind of acts as the backdrop to David Bowie's vocals rather than the other way around. Just amazing. Then the song stops. And, oh, sorry, a bug. Let me just flick it away. Sorry. The song kind of just stops and we get Bowie singing solo, but then the strings come back in and they swell and it gets back into that serene, hypnotic atmosphere. Then at the end of the track, we actually get a guitar solo, very reminiscent of Robert Fripp with his whole Frippatronics thing. And again, Robert Fripp was a longtime collaborator of Bowie in the late 70s for a couple albums there. So again, it's a nice little nod to the past. And it's a great guitar solo with that again. Very serene and melodic. So I can't give everything away. Honestly, guys, what can you say about it? It's a classic. This one here it's definitely not underrated. A lot of people do consider this one of the better tracks on the album. And I'm going to give it a very strong 9.5 out of 10. I would say Lazarus, Dollar Days, and the title track are the big three, but this one here just stands right on the edge. It's almost as great, just not quite, but a very strong 9.5. And yeah, guys, that closes out the album. As you can tell, very passionate about Blackstar. It was just really a perfect send-off for Bowie. And you'd love to think that, maybe if he lived a couple more years, this could have been like a late career renaissance. Well, it was, because the album before this, The Next Day, was just incredible, as I've already mentioned. But imagine if he lived another, 5-10 years, how many fantastic albums he could have made if he stayed in this vein. Again, his vocals didn't suffer at all. Sure, he showed signs of wear and tear, but it suited the music. And I think he could have easily pulled off another couple years, but the fucking liver cancer got to him, and sad. Again, look at people like Bob Dylan. He's 80 years old, just released a new album 2 days ago. Again, I'm recording this in June. I don't know when I'm going to be uploading it. Probably August or something. But, man, it's just such a shame. David Bowie could have easily have gone on for a few more years. But this is what we have. And what an album it is. What a fucking fitting finale to his career. Just with one of his greatest albums. So definitely check out Blackstar if you haven't already. It's one of the best. And as always, I always appreciate you guys watching. There's more David Bowie albums coming your way. Don't worry if you're a big fan of Bowie. I'm a huge fan as well, and I'd love to review his stuff. So stay tuned for more. Peace out, guys. Have a good night.